14 days pregnant? I don't think it worked like that. That's Jonathan Porter. The world calls him Blueface, talking to his own camera back in the spring, laughing off a voicemail he just played out loud to strangers on the internet. He thought that line was the punchline. Turns out it was the setup. Because 5 months later, the woman on the other end of that voicemail isn't just still pregnant. She's got a name picked out. And it's not even his name that's about to end up on the birth certificate. It's his mother's. Real quick before we get into the mess of it. If you're new here, welcome. This is the spot where we actually slow down and read the receipts instead of just reacting to a headline. So tap subscribe, ring that bell, because by the time we get to the DNA question later in this video, you're going to want the notification. Okay, let's get into it. Here's the frame. Rela Coleman, one of Blueface baby mamas, allegedly his fourth, is reportedly due later this summer with a daughter. And as of July 14th, family sources say the baby's name has been locked in. Rela Karlissa Porter. Karlissa, as in Karlissa Saffold Harvey, as in Blueface's own mother. The confirmation didn't come from a press release or a hospital. It came from family friends' comment under a social post, and from Karlissa's mother-in-law-to-be maybe answering DMs, which, in this family, count as official. And pause on that word, official, for 1 second because it's doing a lot of quiet work here. In most families, official means a hospital bracelet, a signed certificate, a press release level announcement. In this one, official is a DM reply screenshot. Official is a live stream toast. Official is a comment left under someone else's post at 1 a.m. that ends up cited in a headline the next morning. That's not a criticism. That's just the operating system this circle has been running on for years. And if you don't understand that from the jump, half the moves in this story are going to look chaotic when they're actually completely consistent with how information gets released in this family. So let's start with what people actually said, because the mouths in this story have been busy for months. Back in April, when the pregnancy claim first surfaced, Rela posted what she said were test results and a string of texts between her and Blueface. Karlissa, never one to sit quiet, commented under the post, and it wasn't warm. Now we know the font fit the profile type, she wrote, but I'll take all them babies that pass the DNA test. Read that twice. That's not a welcome. That's a woman throwing shade at a font, of all things, while leaving the door cracked open just enough to walk through later. And I want you to sit with the architecture of that sentence for a beat, because it's doing something clever. There are two halves. The first half, the font fit the profile type, is pure dismissal, targeting the paperwork itself as suspect. The second half, but I'll take all them babies that pass the DNA test, is a conditional acceptance clause. Read it like a contract because that's essentially what it is. She's rejecting the current evidence while pre-approving future evidence. That's not the language of a woman closing a door. That's the language of a woman keeping a hinge oiled for later. And later showed up faster than anyone expected. Then came the stream. Nevaeh Akira, pregnant with Blueface child at the same time, because of course there's overlap, was caught on a Twitch broadcast yelling at him over the whole situation. And in the middle of that mess, Blueface played a voicemail from a woman who reportedly said she'd gotten pregnant by him weeks earlier. His reaction afterward, recorded on his own account, was that same line we opened with. 14 days pregnant? I don't think it worked like that. He wasn't denying the timeline existed. He was disputing the math. There's a psychological read on that specific move worth unpacking. When someone in the public plays a private voicemail on camera, they're not really addressing the sender. They're outsourcing the humiliation to an audience. It's a specific kind of power play, and it only works if the audience laughs along. He got the laughs in April. What he didn't count on is that in this genre of drama, the person on the other end of the voicemail gets to live stream too, and once she's got the mic, that laugh he purchased in April starts accruing interest. Rela didn't blink. In a live stream response, she said flatly, "I am most definitely pregnant," and followed it with, "I'm not kidding. After we prove that, then you will have 18 years of content out of me, baby. Do DNA and take him for child support." That's not a woman asking to be believed. That's a woman already planning the sequel. And I want to zoom in on that phrase, 18 years of content, because it's easy to hear it as a punchline and miss what it's actually announcing. That's a woman openly reframing motherhood inside this ecosystem as an ongoing publishing schedule. Not a private life, not a family, A content pipeline with a legally guaranteed runtime. Whether you find that bleak or brilliant probably depends on how much time you've spent watching this specific corner of the internet. But you cannot pretend it's an accidental turf phrase. She said the quiet part into a live stream microphone, and she said it on purpose. She wasn't finished either. When someone in her comments floated a dollar figure for what she should walk away with, she shot back. Still wouldn't have got no offer, no 1,000 or 10K, which, translated out of live stream shorthand, means whatever's been whispered isn't close to what she thinks this is worth. A woman who talks about custody in terms of an 18-year subscription isn't thinking about one headline. She's thinking about a career. And that's where the industry piece of this starts to come into focus. Because if you've watched enough of these situations play out, you already know the payout expectation isn't just about child support. It's about attention rights. It's about first-look interviews, podcast appearances, reality show possibilities, brand deals that only exist because of who the father is. Turning down 1,000 or 10K isn't turning down grocery money. It's refusing to sign an NDA that would cap the ceiling on everything else that can be monetized off this story downstream. In this economy, silence has a price tag, and hers is apparently much higher than what's on offer. And Karlissa? Karlissa flipped the script completely by July. On a live stream about a week before the name got confirmed, she practically floated through the whole segment. "That's genius," she said about the idea of a baby carrying her name. A little Karlissa. Somewhere in the same breath, she insisted, "I don't take no sides. I say what I say about everybody." Which, fair, she said plenty about everybody. She also drew a hard line on the paternity question, saying it is not my responsibility to get no DNA test, that her only job is the love on the grandchildren that they bring to me. Convenient boundary. Convenient timing. Let me park on that "not my responsibility" line for one more beat, because it's the kind of sentence that sounds like humility and functions like a firewall. If DNA isn't her responsibility, then whatever the test eventually says can't be her failure, can't be her embarrassment, can't be her problem. She's pre-insulated herself from any outcome. A positive result validates her instinct to celebrate early. A negative result gets absorbed as well. That wasn't my job to verify. That's not a woman speaking off the cuff. That's a woman drafting deniability in real time, on a live stream, in front of an audience that mostly heard warmth. You can hear the warmth, but listen for the paperwork underneath it too. And then there's the video that actually broke this open on the 14th. The one confirming the name itself. The uploader behind it says she went straight to the source. I did reach out to her to ask her what's going on with this. Not a leak, not a screenshot passed around a group chat. A direct DM exchange with Rela's mother, who apparently confirmed the spelling before anyone official said a word publicly. That's worth sitting with for a second, because in this family, official almost never means a press release. It means somebody's mother answered a DM before her son did, which, if you think about it, is its own kind of statement. The father hasn't confirmed. The mother of the baby hasn't posted a public announcement. But the grandmother's grandmother, the maternal side, verified via inbox. That's not disorganization, that's hierarchy. In this family unit, the women appear to be running the announcement calendar, and the man attached to the situation is either opted out or actively being managed around. Either read tells you something about who actually has narrative control here, and it isn't the person with the platinum plaques. Okay, actually hold on. Before we go further, we need to rewind, because there's a version of Karlissa from a few months earlier that doesn't match the one cheering right now. And that contradiction is the whole story. Let's lay the calendar out, because the order matters more than any single quote. Late February, Blueface and Nevaeh Akira publicly confirmed they're expecting. And around this same window, Karlissa is on record warning her son not to name that unborn child after himself, calling the situation with unusually harsh language, and insisting a man's name and legacy are gifts meant for his marriage, not for a baby mama. That's Karlissa in February, gatekeeping the family name like it's a bank vault. And that phrase, gifts meant for his marriage, is a genuinely old-fashioned position. It's the kind of sentiment you'd hear from a grandmother in 1962, not a live stream personality in 2026. Which is fine. People are allowed traditional values. except those values are supposed to be, by definition, load-bearing. They're not supposed to bend based on who's asking or which grandchild is being named after whom. When a principle flexes on a 5-month timeline, it stops being a principle and starts being a preference. And preferences, unlike principles, are always up for negotiation. Remember that when we get to July. Fast forward to April. Rela surfaces with her own pregnancy claim. Allegedly the second overlapping pregnancy running parallel to Nevaeh's. In the paperwork, she lists an expected delivery date of December 29th. That's the number in the document. Write it down because it doesn't survive the summer. May 6th, the paternity fight goes public on stream. The DNA demand, the child support promise, all of it. May 15th, Rela says she's 8 weeks along. Then June 2nd, she posts a 10-week ultrasound, and this time the number attached to it is an estimated due date of August 24th. Sit with that for a second. April's paperwork said December. June's ultrasound says August. That's not a typo-size gap. That's roughly a 4-month jump on a pregnancy that, biologically, doesn't restart its own clock. Somebody's math moved. Nobody's explained why. And I want to be careful here because there is a completely mundane explanation for at least part of this. Early self-reported dates in pregnancies are often just estimates based on last menstrual period. And once an actual dating ultrasound happens, the number can shift by weeks. That's medically normal. What isn't normal is a 4-month correction with zero follow-up commentary from anyone involved. If a legitimate ultrasound moved the date, the honest move is to say, on camera, the earlier paperwork was an estimate, the current one is measured, here's why they don't match. That correction never came. The old number just quietly disappeared, and the new number quietly replaced it. And the discourse moved on to the baby's name because the baby's name is more fun to argue about than a due date discrepancy. That's not accidental. That's how narrative control actually works in this space. You don't refute an inconvenient fact. You replace it with a more interesting one. The name becomes the headline. The math becomes a footnote nobody clicks on. July 12th is where the tone actually turns. That's when clips start circulating of Karlissa asking, half joking and half fishing, whether one of her grandbabies is getting ready to be named after her. One day later, she's toasting to a little Karlissa on a live stream. One day after that, July 14th, the family confirms it's real. Rela Karlissa Porter, generational name. Both grandmothers folded into one child before she's even born. Notice the shape of it. The woman who spent February drawing a legacy line in the sand is, by July, the one being handed the pen. And notice the compression of that timeline, too. Question floated on the 12th. Public toast on the 13th. Confirmation on the 14th. That's a 3-day rollout, which in PR terms is a coordinated campaign, not a coincidence. Someone, and I don't think it's the baby, since the baby isn't born yet, decided this specific news needed to break in exactly that sequence, with exactly that build-up. Curiosity, celebration, confirmation. That's a marketing arc, not a family update. And there's a smaller thread running underneath all of it that people keep skipping past. This isn't the first time Karlissa's had to walk back something she said in public. Back in the summer, she publicly apologized to NBA YoungBoy after he called her out over comments from one of her live streams. And separately, she's apologized to her own son for letting outside women. His words, allegedly, come between them while he was locked up. Say what you want about the woman's filter, but she's got a documented habit of talking first, walking back later. The font comment in April fits that pattern perfectly. So does the champagne toast in July. She's not inconsistent by accident. She's inconsistent on a schedule. And if you've watched enough of these figures over the years, you know that particular schedule has a name in the industry. The outrage and apology cycle. It's not unique to Karlissa. It's basically the operating rhythm of every long-form live stream personality who monetizes reaction. You say the loud thing, the algorithm rewards you, the criticism arrives, the apology gets its own view count, and then the whole cycle resets for next month's cycle. If you graph her public statements over the last 2 years, the pattern practically draws itself. That doesn't make her insincere. Apologies can be genuine and predictable at the same time, but it does mean her July toast isn't a plot twist. It's the next scheduled beat in a rhythm she's been running for years. Now let's zoom in, because a few small details are doing a lot of quiet work here. First, the font comment. Karlissa didn't just doubt the pregnancy. In April, she doubted the specific document, down to the typography. That's not casual skepticism. That's someone who's seen enough paperwork drama in this family to know what a doctored letter looks like, or at least claims to. And yet 3 months later, she's fully invested in the outcome of a pregnancy she once mocked on a technicality. Either she got convinced by something we haven't seen, or the excitement of being immortalized in a name simply outran her own suspicion. Second, that due date jump. 4 months is too big to be rounding error and too small to be a second pregnancy nobody mentioned. Reportedly, early self-reported dates in these situations get adjusted once an actual ultrasound measures the fetus. That's medically normal, sure. But it's also exactly the kind of gap that turns a shaky original claim into a story that quietly rewrites its own foundation while everyone's too busy talking about the baby's name to double back and ask which date was ever real. Third, Blueface own math objection. 14 days pregnant? I don't think it worked like that. He's not wrong that 2 weeks isn't enough to confirm anything biologically. But he said that line as a joke, on camera, to an audience, instead of saying it privately to the woman actually carrying the child. He's been allegedly ghosting her texts and ultrasound since. According to family accounts, she's kept sending updates into a silence he's chosen. The joke aged into an absence, and that absence is louder than most people are giving it credit for. Because here's the thing, a father who genuinely believed a pregnancy wasn't his would typically issue at least a public statement to that effect. A father who genuinely believed it was his would typically say something warm adjacent by month 5. Blueface has done neither. He made one joke in April and has essentially gone dark on the topic since, letting his mother do the public-facing emotional labor while he continues with unrelated business as usual. That's not a father in denial. That's a father who's figured out that saying nothing is, tactically, the cheapest option available. No confirmation to be sued over, no denial to be embarrassed by. Silence is a paternity strategy too, and it's the one currently in play. Let's zoom in on one more fragment before we widen back out, because it's small and it's the kind of detail that gets swallowed by the bigger headline. Karlissa's April comment wasn't just, "I don't believe it." It was specific. The font fit the profile type. Font, not the dates, not the signature, not the doctor's name, the typeface. That's an oddly technical thing to fixate on unless you've spent real time comparing paperwork before, which tells you this family has seen enough alleged pregnancy documents circulate that someone's developed an eye for formatting. That's forensic instinct born out of repetition, not paranoia out of nowhere. And here's the other fragment worth pulling apart, the due date swing itself. December 29th to August 24th isn't a rounding correction. It's a full trimester's difference, and reportedly, the kind of adjustment that only happens when an early self-reported estimate gets overwritten by an actual ultrasound measurement. Medically, sure, that happens. Rhetorically, though, it's the difference between a story that started shaky and a story nobody bothered to double back and reconcile once the new number replaced the old one. Nobody in this family flagged the change. We're flagging it now. And here's why flagging it matters, even if it turns out to be innocent. Because in a story where every other date and receipt has been treated as evidence, this one date has been treated as decorative. When it was December, it was proof. When it became August, it was just the new number. Nobody clipped it, nobody argued about it, nobody demanded a corrected timeline. That selective attention is itself a data point. It tells you what this audience and this family actually treats as important, and it tells you what they've collectively agreed to look past. The name is a headline. The date is a hallway. And important things get moved through hallways when nobody's watching the door. So how did the outside world receive all this? Split right down the middle, and not politely. Under the original test result post, the comment section basically turned into a live cross-examination. One commenter zeroed in on the letter's formatting, writing that it looked fake and demanding a stamped doctor's note with the signature. Another just wanted an old daytime TV host to come out of retirement and settle it on air. That's the skeptic camp. Treat the whole thing like unverified evidence until proven otherwise. Then there's the family camp, and it reads almost like the opposite planet. A family friend, responding directly to Karlissa under a public post, laid out the sentimental version. The answer is yes. From the very day she found out it was a girl, she said her name was going to be after both grandmothers because the name is generational in her family. It has nothing to do with disrespecting anyone whatsoever. No DNA test mentioned. No due date math mentioned. Just heritage, softly worded, aimed at healing a block list rather than settling a paternity question. And there's a whole third camp that doesn't get quoted enough. The neutral watchers, the ones who don't have a horse in a race, but who've been observing this specific family long enough to have pattern matched every previous cycle. They're not skeptical about paternity necessarily, and they're not sentimental about names either. They're mostly just tired. They've seen this exact story arc before with different names, different due dates, different live streams, and they know how it ends. With everyone folded back into a family portrait about 6 months later, all previous grievances quietly memory hold until the next one starts. That's not cynicism. That's institutional memory. And it's arguably the most accurate reading in the room, precisely because it isn't emotionally invested in any single outcome. Here's where I push back on both camps a little. The skeptics are right that the paperwork has holes. The fond joke didn't come from strangers. It came from inside the family. But the sentimental read isn't wrong either, because generational names are absolutely a real thing people do, unrelated to any drama. What nobody in either camp wants to say out loud is that both things can be true at once. The emotional gesture can be completely sincere, and the underlying biological question can still be completely unresolved. This family has built an entire content cycle around never letting those two facts sit in the same sentence. And honestly, that's the real story nobody's spelling out plainly. This isn't really about a baby's middle name. It's about leverage, the kind that gets traded in families that have learned to negotiate through live streams instead of lawyers. The mainstream read on all this is sweet and simple. Grandma's touched, family's healing, baby's blessed. I don't think it's that clean. Watch what actually happened in order. Karlissa spent months publicly withholding warmth from this pregnancy, mocking the paperwork, refusing to confirm anything, keeping Rela at arm's length just like Blueface has, allegedly, kept her blocked from real conversation. Then, the second a name gets floated with her attached to it, she's toasting champagne on a live stream. That's not reconciliation happening naturally. That's reconciliation being purchased with a name before a single DNA test has been run. Think about what that does functionally. A name is permanent the moment it's on a birth certificate. You can't unname a baby the way you can walk back a comment or delete a live stream. So if Karlissa's name goes on that document before paternity is confirmed, the family has effectively locked in an emotional claim on a child whose biological tie to them is, right now, allegedly still an open question. If the DNA later confirms it, great, everyone wins, no harm done. But if it doesn't, Karlissa's name is still out there, permanently, attached to a child she publicly claimed before she had any proof to claim her. That's either an enormous act of grace or an enormous act of getting ahead of a story before the facts can embarrass anyone. And knowing this particular family's history with public paternity fights, I'm leaning toward the second one, even though I'd genuinely love to be wrong about that. And let me make the leverage math even more explicit, because I think a lot of people are hearing leverage and picturing some kind of villain with a spreadsheet operation, and that's not what I mean. Leverage in this context is much simpler and much more human than that. Rela, right now, is a woman 5 months into a pregnancy that a very famous man has publicly refused to confirm from a family that publicly mocked her paperwork, in an ecosystem that runs on attention. The single most valuable card she has left to play is not the pregnancy itself. Pregnancies happen every day and don't guarantee anybody anything. The single most valuable card is her ability to route this baby's identity, name, and future public presence in whatever direction serves her best. Handing the middle name to the grandmother who mocked her 3 months ago isn't submission. It's an alliance. She just made the woman who could have been her loudest lifelong critic into a woman with a personal, emotional, publicly witnessed stake in this child's well-being. That's a chess move, and it's a good one. The skeptics will say this is just Karlissa being petty and jumping the gun for clout. Maybe, but pettiness doesn't usually come with champagne toasts. The romantics will say a name is just a name, nothing strategic about it. Sure, accept this specific family has weaponized names before. Remember the "don't give your legacy to a baby mama" speech from just months earlier. The neutral crowd will say everyone's overthinking a baby announcement. Respectfully, overthinking is the only appropriate response to a family that's contradicted its own stated values twice in one calendar year over the exact same category of decision. And the loyalists will say Rela deserves credit for extending an olive branch to a woman who mocked her pregnancy in public. She does. That doesn't mean the olive branch isn't also a very smart move. What lingers here isn't whether the name is sweet. It's whether sweetness and strategy have ever actually been separate in this family to begin with. And let me widen out for 1 second, because there's a bigger cultural pattern this fits into that people don't talk about enough. The line between family drama and content strategy has, in this generation of celebrity, functionally disappeared. 20 years ago, a rap star's baby mama situation was tabloid material. Something the family tried to bury, something the publicist controlled, something that leaked reluctantly against everyone's will. Now, the family is the publicist. The live stream is the leak. The baby's name gets announced by a family friend in a comment section because that channel monetizes better than a press release would. What we're watching isn't a family that's uniquely messy. It's a family that has correctly identified that mess, monetized, pays the bills, and has stopped pretending otherwise. Whether that's admirable or exhausting probably depends on the day, you catch me asking. And zoom out one more click, because there's a gender read here worth naming too. Every major decision in this saga, the pregnancy announcement, the paperwork release, the DNA demand, the name reveal, the champagne toast, has been driven by a woman. Rela announced. Karlissa reacted. Rela's mother confirmed. Karlissa toasted. A family friend explained. The man at the biological center of all of it has said one sentence, a punchline, and then vanished from the discourse. That's not incidental. That's actually the shape of how these stories increasingly get told in this space. Women are the narrators, women are the negotiators, women are the ones deciding which beats break when. The famous man's name is on the thumbnail, but he's essentially a supporting character in his own paternity saga. That's a genuinely modern development, and I don't think we're going to fully appreciate how much has shifted until we look back on it in a decade. So where does this actually go? Watch the DNA question first. Once that baby arrives, expect testing to happen quietly, likely off-stream, because both sides now have too much invested in the name to let a public result blow it up before the inks even dry on anything official. Don't be shocked when the test result, whatever it says, gets announced almost as an afterthought, buried under 3 other unrelated posts, because nobody in this circle wants the DNA confirmed/denied it competing with "we already gave her the name" as the headline. Watch Karlissa specifically. Once this baby is born, expect her to lean fully into the grandmother role regardless of what any test says, because she's already spent a live stream publicly attaching her identity to this child. Walking that back now would cost her more socially than just absorbing the child into the family, biology aside. By the time anyone circles back to ask, wait, did we ever confirm paternity? The answer will likely be buried under 100 new video titles about something else entirely. And watch Blueface too, because his silence in this stretch is doing a specific kind of work. If the DNA comes back positive, expect a warm post around the time of the birth. Nothing too effusive, nothing that could be read as making up for months of neglect. Just a cleanly worded acknowledgement that lets him slide back into the frame without owing anyone an explanation for where he was. If it comes back negative, expect no post at all. Just a slow, quiet return to his existing content schedule, as if the last 5 months of pregnancy discourse were somebody else's problem. He set himself up so that either outcome costs him roughly nothing publicly. That's not luck. That's positioning. And watch Rela's next moves in particular. because this is where the 18-year content promise gets tested for real. If she meant it, and everything about how she's played this so far suggests she did, expect a podcast appearance, a long-form sit-down interview, or a docuseries pitch to surface within a year of the baby's birth. She's already demonstrated she understands the leverage math. The name reveal was Chapter 1. The public narrative expansion is Chapter 2. Whether anyone offers her the platform she's clearly angling for depends entirely on how the DNA lands, but she's built the runway either way. That's what a career move looks like when it's dressed up as a personal announcement. And here's the one that actually worries me a little. If this plays out the way it's shaping up to, a name granted before proof, a reconciliation bought with a birth certificate instead of an actual conversation, expect this to become a new playbook for every future dispute in this orbit. The next baby mama, whoever she ends up being, already has a blueprint now. Skip the DNA fight, skip the block list, just offer the family name early and watch the doors open. 5 years out, don't be surprised if this exact sequence, accusation, mockery, then a name as a peace offering, repeats itself so often it stops even registering as a headline. That's not resolution. That's a pattern hardening into a habit, and habits like that don't stay contained to one family for long. Not in this industry. Not with this much attention rewarding it every single time. And the last thing I'll say on the forecasting piece, because I want to leave you with something to actually watch for and not just vibes. Pay attention to whether Karlissa references this baby by name on livestream before the baby is born. If she does, that's confirmation that the name is functioning as a public commitment device, not a private family choice. And it means the family has fully leaned into the strategy of pre-naming as narrative insurance. If she doesn't, if the name stays quiet until the actual birth, then maybe, just maybe, some of the sweetness Red holds up, and this whole thing really is just a grandmother getting emotional about a granddaughter. I know which way I'm betting, but I've been wrong about this family before, and I'll happily be wrong about it again if the receipts eventually say so. Alright, that's where I'm leaving it for now. You got the version nobody else laid out in order, so run it back if you missed a piece of it. Drop your actual read in the comments, because some of y'all have been putting together theories better than half the outlets covering this. And if you want the DNA update the second it drops, subscribe and keep that bell on, because part of this story is still unwritten. Appreciate y'all. Talk soon.